I never thought much about mornings. Same corner table, same chipped mug, same notebook that stayed mostly empty. The coffee shop wasn't special, just the kind of place where no one asked questions if you sat alone too long. That's where I first noticed her. She walked in like she had nowhere urgent to be, though the way she touched her sleeve, pulling it straight, smoothing it again, told me she was aware of eyes on her. Mid-40s, maybe? A quiet sort of presence, not loud or bright, but steady, like a song you realize you've been humming without noticing. The first time we spoke, it wasn't really speaking. The barista mixed up our drinks. I reached for the cup, she reached at the same time. Our hands almost touched. She pulled hers back too quickly, then gave a half-smile, like she'd done it 100 times. "It's yours," she said. Her voice was low, unhurried. "Thanks," I managed. I wanted to add something, anything, but the words slipped away. After that, she started showing up more often. Not every day, but enough that I noticed. Sometimes with a book, sometimes just staring out the window. One morning, she glanced at me when the barista asked for her order. "Same as last time," she said, then looked at me as if I might remember what it was. I didn't, but I nodded anyway. She laughed under her breath, barely there. Loneliness makes you pay attention to small things. The way she folded her napkin neatly before leaving, tucking it into the cup as though unfinished coffee deserved some respect. The way her eyes lingered on the door before stepping out, like she was deciding whether she wanted to be seen leaving or not. I kept pretending to write in my notebook. The truth was, the pages were just lines of half-sentences, broken thoughts, the kind you don't finish because no one will read them. I caught myself glancing toward her hands more often than I should have, the way her fingers tapped lightly against her mug when she was thinking, or how she rested them on the table, palm open, as if something invisible sat there. One rainy afternoon, the shop was nearly empty. She sat at the table across from mine, though there were plenty of others open. We didn't talk, not really, but the silence between us felt different, like it had been agreed on without words. I wanted to ask her name. Instead, I stared at the window streaked with rain, my throat tightening around the things I wouldn't say. When she finally stood to leave, she brushed her coat sleeve, hesitated, then turned toward me. "You'll catch a cold sitting that close to the draft," she said. Not quite a warning, not quite concern. I smiled, awkward. "I'll risk it." She gave a small nod, then walked out into the rain, umbrella snapping open with a quiet discipline. I thought that was the end of it, just another almost conversation I'd replay later when the apartment felt too silent. But when I left an hour later, my coffee long gone cold, I found something folded neatly on my table. A napkin, the same way she always folded them. On the corner, in small, slanted handwriting, "Next time, don't sit so far away." I stood there, holding it, rain dripping from the awning onto my jacket. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. All I could think about was whether she'd be there tomorrow, and whether I had the courage to move closer. The next morning, I sat closer. Not right beside her, but close enough that the barista raised an eyebrow when she saw me pick a different table. She noticed too, though she didn't say anything at first. Just a small lift of her mouth before she set her bag down. We sat in silence for a while, the scrape of spoons and hum of the espresso machine filling the space. When she finally spoke, it was as though the words had been waiting on her tongue. "I used to come here with my husband," she said. No preface, no warning. "He hated the coffee, but he liked the windows." I nodded, not sure what to do with the sudden weight of it. My instinct was to ask questions, but I didn't. Instead, I said quietly, "The windows are the best part." She gave me that half-smile again, but this time it didn't quite reach her eyes. I thought about her words long after, turning them over in my head. She was older than me by at least 20 years. Maybe more. The thought of it made my chest tighten, not in a way I could name, but in the way you hesitate before stepping into water that might be too deep. The age difference was obvious, but it wasn't just that. Something about her carried boundaries, lines drawn by years I hadn't lived, by memories that belonged to someone else. And yet, the more I noticed them, the more I wanted to lean closer, to test how sharp they really were. Another week passed in this slow orbit. Sometimes we talked, mostly about nothing, books she'd read, a song playing too loudly in the cafe. Other times, we just sat in the same silence, two people pretending it was coincidence. One afternoon, when the rain made the shop feel smaller, she reached across the table. Not for me, at least not directly. My tea had slid toward the edge, about to spill. She steadied the cup with her hand, fingers brushing mine for the briefest second. The touch was accidental, but my skin burned like it meant something more. She pulled back quickly, adjusting the sleeve of her coat, her expression unreadable. "You're young," she said after a moment, almost like an accusation. "I'm not that young," I answered, though the words sounded thinner than I wanted them to. Her gaze lingered, soft but steady, as if she was measuring whether I believed what I'd just said. Then she looked away, folding her napkin with careful precision. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Not as a boy, not as just another stranger at a coffee shop, but as someone who had been waiting quietly for a long time. When she stood to leave, she touched the back of my chair as she passed. Just a light press, like she was steadying herself. But the warmth of it stayed long after she walked out the door. It was later than usual when I walked in. The cafe was almost empty, chairs stacked at the far end, the air already carrying the smell of bleach before closing. She was there, waiting with a book open but unread, fingers resting on the page as if holding her place in more than just a story. "You're late," she said softly, not looking up right away. "Got caught up." I shrugged, sliding into the chair across from her. For a while neither of us spoke. She tapped her finger lightly against the spine of her book. I watched, pretending to stir sugar into my tea though I hadn't added any. Every gesture felt magnified in the quiet, her glance at the clock, the way she smoothed the corner of the page she hadn't turned. When she finally set the book aside, she asked, "Do your friends wonder where you are?" The question caught me. "Not really. You're always here. So are you." That earned the smallest laugh, but her eyes didn't quite match it. She leaned back, arms folding like she just remembered something she wasn't supposed to forget. A shadow passed by the window, someone she knew. I could tell by the way she stiffened, her posture changing. She kept her eyes low until they were gone. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. "I shouldn't," she started, then stopped. The sentence just sat there, unfinished, like the steam curling from her cup. I wanted to ask shouldn't what? But my throat wouldn't work. Instead, I nodded, as if I understood, though the truth was, I didn't want to. She looked at me then, properly, as though weighing something invisible between us. "You're too young," she whispered. It was the same as before, but softer, almost like she was convincing herself this time. I tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. My hands tightened around the mug, holding on to the heat like it could anchor me. Then, footsteps. The barista announced last call, stacking cups noisily behind the counter. The spell broke, just enough to remind us where we were. She reached for her bag. I thought that was it, she was leaving. But instead she paused. Her hand brushed against mine again, not by accident this time. The briefest pressure, barely a second, but my breath caught like it was something far more dangerous. She pulled back just as quickly, eyes darting away, lips parting as if she might explain. But no explanation came. Only silence. I leaned in without meaning to, close enough to notice the faint trace of rain still clinging to her coat, the way her breath lifted and fell just slightly faster. The distance between us felt thinner than air. My heart pressed against my ribs, waiting for something I wasn't sure either of us would allow. Then she turned her face, just enough that the moment slipped. A half second from something we couldn't take back. A half confession caught in the space between. And then, nothing. It wasn't the cafe that night. She suggested a walk instead, said the air was too heavy indoors. The street was quiet, lamps throwing long shadows on the pavement. I kept my hands in my pockets, unsure what to do with them. We didn't talk much at first. Just the sound of our steps, hers steady, mine uneven, like I couldn't decide if I should keep pace or fall behind. She stopped once, near a bench under the branches of a half-dead tree. "I don't usually do this." Her voice was low, words clipped like she was editing herself mid-sentence. "Do what?" "Spend time like this. With someone." She trailed off, pressing her lips together. I sat down on the bench, leaving space between us, though not much. She stayed standing, arms folded, eyes on the ground, as if the cracks in the sidewalk were suddenly important. "People notice things," she said finally. "They always do." I thought about the way she stiffened in the cafe when someone familiar passed by. About how she always sat with her back to the wall. "You care what they think?" I asked. Silence. She didn't answer right away, just tugged at the edge of her sleeve. I could hear the faint rustle of fabric. Then, quietly, "I care more than I want to." The space between us felt sharper. I wanted to tell her I didn't care, that none of it mattered. But the words stuck, heavy with everything I couldn't promise. "I keep thinking," she said, finally sitting down beside me, "that this isn't fair to you." Her shoulder brushed mine when she settled in, not enough to call it deliberate, but enough that my chest tightened. "Why?" I asked. "Because you'll wake up one day and wonder why you wasted your time with someone already halfway through her life." She laughed, dry, almost bitter. "And I'll have to watch you go." I turned toward her, but she kept her eyes forward, fixed on the lamplight pooling across the street. "You think I haven't already wondered?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. My throat tightened, but I didn't take them back. That made her finally look at me. There was something raw in her gaze, fear, maybe, or something too close to longing to admit out loud. She reached for her hair, tucking it behind her ear though it didn't need fixing. A small, nervous motion. Then she whispered, "So what is it you want from me?" The air between us stilled. My answer hovered at the edge of my lips, unspoken, dangerous. I leaned forward slightly, close enough to see the faint line of worry at her brow, close enough that if either of us moved another inch, everything would change. I didn't move. Neither did she. The question hung there, heavier than the night air. The next morning, she wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe she was late. I lingered, finished my coffee too quickly, ordered another just to stay longer. Every time the bell over the door rang, I glanced up. Not her. Not even close. The day after, same thing. And the one after that. The napkin she'd left me weeks ago sat folded in my wallet. I pulled it out, the ink smudged slightly from the wear. "Next time, don't sit so far away." The words felt heavier now, like a joke that had expired. On the fourth day, she came in, different. She ordered to go, didn't sit down. Her eyes brushed over me, quick, almost like she hadn't seen me at all. "Busy week?" I asked, forcing casual. "Something like that," she said, voice clipped. She adjusted her coat, her bag, anything to keep her hands busy. "Everything okay?" She hesitated. A pause too long. Then, "My son's back in town." The words landed quietly but carried weight I couldn't quite name. "Oh," I said, and left it there. She smiled faintly, not at me, not really, more the polite kind you give a stranger who holds the door open. Then she was gone again, the bell over the door jingling like punctuation. That night, I caught myself drafting a message on my phone. Nothing bold. Just, "Hope you're okay. Miss seeing you." My thumb hovered over send. Then I deleted it. The next time I saw her, she sat at the far corner, not our table. A younger man, older than me, but still young enough, stopped by, greeting her with a familiarity I couldn't place. She introduced him as her nephew, though the explanation came too quickly, like a defense. We exchanged only a wave that day. A small lift of the hand, nothing more. The cafe felt different after that. Louder, emptier at the same time. I tried sitting where she used to sit, but it felt borrowed, like wearing someone else's jacket. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. like life forgot to finish the sentence. On my desk at home, a notebook lay open to half a line I'd written weeks ago. Sometimes silence says more than words. I stared at it, the pen resting where I dropped it. My phone buzzed once, her name flashing. A text: coffee tomorrow? I started to type back, fingers shaking slightly. Then stopped. I didn't know if she meant it the way I wanted it to mean. So I left it unsent, the message box empty, the cursor blinking like it had all the answers I couldn't say aloud. She invited me over one evening, almost casually. Said she had too much tea in the cupboard and hated wasting things. Her kitchen was small, warm from the kettle on the stove. The light above the sink hummed faintly, casting everything in a tired yellow glow. I sat at the table while she moved around, pouring water, setting cups down like we'd done it 100 times before. We didn't talk much. The silence pressed close, but not in the same way as the cafe. Here it was heavier, private. No clatter of dishes, no background chatter to fill the gaps. She sat across from me, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. "I know," I answered. Her shoulders rose, then fell. "And yet," she broke off, shaking her head, a half-smile that didn't last. I wanted to say something brave, but the words kept slipping away. What came out was smaller. "I just don't want to stop seeing you." That made her look at me. Really look. Her eyes were tired, guarded, but there was something else there too, something that had been circling us for weeks. "You don't understand what that means," she whispered. "I've already lived the part you're rushing toward. The mistakes. The endings. Maybe I don't," I admitted. "But I know how I feel when I'm around you. And when you're not there, it feels like I'm missing something I didn't even know I needed." The words hung in the air, raw, too bare. I regretted them as soon as they left me, but I didn't take them back. She closed her eyes for a moment, like the weight of it was too much to hold. Then she leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table, her hands folded. "You make me feel young again," she said, the confession so quiet I almost didn't catch it. "And that terrifies me." Neither of us moved. The kettle on the stove clicked as it cooled. "I'm not asking for forever," I said finally, voice low. "Just now?" Her lips parted, then closed again. She studied me, searching for something, certainty, maybe, or weakness. I held her gaze, even when it felt too heavy. At last, she reached across the table. Not fast, not sudden. Just a slow, deliberate movement until her fingers rested over mine. Warm, trembling slightly. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even an answer. But it was real. We stayed like that, hands barely touching, the quiet between us no longer something to escape. She gave a small nod, more to herself than to me. Then, with the faintest smile, she said, "Okay." Time didn't shift all at once. It stretched, folded. Some mornings we met, some we didn't. But when we did, it was never accidental anymore. The cafe became less of a hiding place and more of a habit. She'd arrive early, always with her book, and by 8:47 I'd walk through the door. Sometimes she already had a tea waiting for me, sometimes I ordered it myself, but she always teased me about how long it took me to finish one cup. Her coffee stayed the same, black, strong, always left half drunk. I joked she liked the idea of coffee more than the taste. She'd raise an eyebrow and remind me I never touched the sugar I stirred in. Those little nothings became the rhythm of us. Evenings found us in quieter places. A walk around the block, the bench under the half-dead tree, her kitchen with the humming light. The first time I washed dishes while she dried, it felt almost startling in its intimacy. No kiss, no declarations, just two people sharing silence in a way that didn't feel empty. I noticed the changes in her before she admitted them. The way her laugh came easier, the way she didn't scan the room as much when we were out. She began bringing me stories about her son, her late husband, small pieces of her life she hadn't let surface before. Not all at once. Just fragments. Offered like trust, slowly. For me, the loneliness softened. I still had nights where the apartment was too quiet, where I caught myself drafting unsent texts. But it didn't ache the same. Because I knew I'd see her in the morning, folding her napkin just so, looking at the window before she left. We never called it love. Maybe that was the point. It was something steadier, less fragile. A closeness that didn't demand more than what it was. One Sunday, we ended up on that same bench. The air was warmer now, spring shifting the branches overhead. She sat with her tea in a thermos, I with my notebook, still mostly empty, but not entirely. She leaned against me lightly, not in need of comfort, just resting. "It feels different now," she said. "Better?" I asked. She smiled, small, thoughtful. "Just real." I didn't reply. Didn't need to. The silence carried it well enough. Later, as we stood to leave, I checked my watch. 8:47 p.m. I laughed quietly to myself. She looked at me, curious. "What?" "Nothing," I said, shaking my head. "Just right on time." She didn't press. She just slipped her hand into mine as we walked. No words, no weight, just warmth. And for the first time, I didn't feel paused. I felt finished, in the way a sentence knows exactly where to end. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?